Good evening, everybody. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the James City County Planning Commission. It is March 14th at 6 p.m. Mr. Holt, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Knoll.
Present.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is vice chair to the commission. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. Kropf.
Here.
Mr. Kropf represents the Powhatan District. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member and is chair of the Planning Commission. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum, and tonight we also have a request by Mr. Rose, who represents the Roberts District, to participate in tonight's meeting remotely from Naples, Florida, due to family matters. Per your adopted policy and consistent with state code, the commission members present must consider the remote participation by a majority vote.
Is it voice or roll?
Just voice.
So we have a request for Dr. Rose to participate remotely. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So motion carries. Thank you. Dr. Rose, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So we have two upcoming items. One is the annual organizational meeting, which is the election of officers, to be followed by the proposed calendar for 2022 and 2023. I'd like to entertain a motion for chair of the Planning Commission.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Kropp?
since Mr. O'Connor's only been sitting in that seat for the last couple of months, I'd like to make a motion that we renew his contract for a full term.
Second. I have a second.
Remediation
Is that why you're
training
raising
is
your hand?
warranted.
Yeah, I was going to nominate you, but that's right. Okay, I'm seconding.
Thanks. Is there an increase with that in pay?
Take
Yes.
that up with the big boss over
I
there.
heard there was a big increase in pay.
Any other nominations for chair? Seeing and hearing none, we have a motion on the floor, and we can do that by a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Congratulations.
Motion carries.
Congratulations.
Thank you, I think. So our second nomination this evening is for vice chair. I'll open the floor for a nomination.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Frank Polster as vice chair.
Mr. Polster, will you continue to accept?
I will,
Great. Thank
under
you
your
very much.
leadership.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing and seeing none, we have a motion for Mr. Polster to serve as vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Do you need to present anything on the calendar, or?
Really, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, no changes from the draft calendar you saw last time, and staff would recommend approval.
All right. Any questions for staff on the proposed calendar for 22-23?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to recommend approval.
So we have a motion to approve the calendar for 22-23. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're down to public comment. I'll open the floor for anybody to make comments, but I assume you're here for CIP, so we'll just hold off for the public hearing on that piece. And seeing and hearing no one, we will move on to, we do have reports of the commission, but I don't think it's necessary to do that. We'll just continue that on to our regular meeting in April. So we have nothing on our consent agenda tonight, and our final item tonight is our public hearings for fiscal year 23-27 Capital Improvements Program. Ms. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. After a series of meetings to discuss and evaluate this year's capital improvement program requests, the Policy Committee is forwarding its recommendations for the FY23 through FY27 CIP for your consideration. This year, a total of 31 projects were submitted, 25 from county departments, 3 from the library, and 3 from the schools. Of the 31 projects submitted, 26 projects, 2 library, and 3 school projects were included in the previous CIP budget. Committee members use a standardized set of ranking criteria to prioritize each application. This is provided in your packets for reference. Individual committee members' scores were used as well as Z-scores to determine the final ranking. On the screen is the Policy Committee's final project rankings in order of priority. At its March 2nd meeting, the committee voted unanimously to forward these priorities to serve as a recommendation to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of these priorities to the Board of Supervisors for consideration during the budget process. Thank you, and unless you have any questions for me, I will turn it over to Miss Betsy Fowler from the Williamsburg James City County Library.
Ms. Costello, any questions for Ms. Costello? Thank you. Public hearing. Good evening, Ms. Fowler. How are you?
I'm well, thank
Great.
you. Good
Thanks for
evening.
coming out tonight.
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about the library's CIP requests. I did a brief PowerPoint about the request, if that's okay. This one? Scroll up. All right. Let me move forward. So just a quick overview to give you some context about the Williamsburg Regional Library. It's established by a regional contract between James City County, the City of Williamsburg, and York. York pays a reduced amount and does not have a facility. They have a separate independent county library system and participate in this one because of the number of residents that live close into Williamsburg that enjoy using the Williamsburg Regional Library. The library is a National Star Library. It's rated one of the top 5% public libraries in the nation. This is because of the excellent support it has received from the jurisdictions for many years, and also from additional state funding because we're a regional library system, and that rating is based on use statistics per capita that are turned into the federal government each year by the Library of Virginia. We have 62,000 currently active registered users. Over pre-pandemic, over 500,000 annual visits. This year, we're a little shy of 300,000, but we are rebounding quickly. Over 1 million items are checked out annually, and each locality's contribution is calculated based on the number of checkouts by their residents. So here's the numbers. You can see that James City County pays the lion's share of the annual operating budget at 71%. And that continues to grow incrementally each year as the county population is growing much more rapidly than the city. And James City County residents account for 70% of the checkouts from the Williamsburg Library building on Scotland Street. An overview, did I get everything here? Yeah. An overview of the facilities. So there's 2 libraries, the Williamsburg Library on Scotland Street and the James City County Library on Croker Road. We also have some admin space and meeting room space in the Stryker Center, which is shared with the City of Williamsburg. In the contract, each locality is responsible for the capital costs in their jurisdiction. Virginia state standards specify 1 square foot per capita of library space. The James City County Library is 35,000 square feet. The current population is roughly 78,000, so there's a 43,000 square foot deficit, which is fairly significant. It's another building. So since 2007, the library had a consultant, and they put in requesting another James City County Library be constructed. This was in the CIP and then removed during the 2008 recession. And then when I came on board in 2017, the library board determined that they would like to go forward and request that second library again. And if you'll remember what happened, we did a citizen survey, and there was a proposal from the acting county administrator in James City County that perhaps the city and the county could do a joint facility. And then there was some discussion about where this would be located. And then the public was extremely vocal about having it located on the existing site. And that was all three county residents from all three counties. And the city decided, based on the economic impact of the library, that they didn't want to consider another site. So at that point, it became a question about whether or not James City County wants to invest in a capital project in another jurisdiction, or whether they want to go forward with building their own library and let Williamsburg address their facility needs in the city. So we're hoping that we're going to get to some resolution and answer to that question this spring so we can have a clear direction forward. Currently, the Williamsburg Library, which accounts for most of the use in the library system, and it's not a county facility, but it is a very problematic facility. We have a lack of space that's severely impacting services. It's a substandard building at this point from the 70s. We have a lot of ADA access issues. We have failing infrastructure. The roof is failing. If you visit it, you know that every time there's a rainstorm, we have trash cans set out all over the building with cones to catch the water. So we really feel like a new facility is urgently needed to continue to offer the excellent library services that the library offers otherwise. And then the last facility thing I want to mention is this year, for the first time, we proposed a 10,000 square foot library to serve the Grove community. In terms of the two proposals about a new major library, they are in the CIP as an alternate still. Option one, we're calling it, is a 40,000 square foot library in James City County with a cost estimate of approximately $24 million. And these are the pros: county-owned, constructed, and maintained facility, a potential economic anchor for a commercial corridor in James City County. It would be able to be a more suburban-style library and offer expansive parking and outside spaces. The cons are the county would pay all the capital costs, and there would be increased long-term operational costs with the third library, which we're estimating to be $1.3 million annually. And this doesn't include a community theater option at that building, but that would be the price tag, $6.347. And the second option is the joint library. The consultant who did the study in 2018 recommended that it would be a 55,000 square foot facility to serve both jurisdictions, but we were able to trim 5,000 off of that with the premise that it could be attached to the Stryker building and we could maximize that existing space. And of course, the pros are the possible reduced capital construction costs, sharing the costs, reduce long-term operational costs with 2 versus 3 buildings. The cons, the loss of a possible anchor in a James City County commercial corridor, and there are significant site challenges at the Williamsburg location. The biggest one, which is parking. And this cost estimate does include the community theater and 200 spaces of underground parking. And other considerations are the Williamsburg Library would be very much an urban-style library with not a lot of parking, not a lot of outdoor space for activities, but located in walking distance to a lot of other items that are appealing to people who are visiting the downtown. There also would be very limited space for any future expansion. The current site is an established and very successful library location, which is important because libraries really need to be located properly to be utilized and the investment maximized. We know that people combine library use with other errands, shopping, and eating out and other errands, so you really want to be where people are going and right in the main thoroughfare of traffic if possible. The 2018 public survey indicated strong support for the current site. However, there weren't any alternatives presented. So it's very possible that if a survey or a question were asked of the public presenting an alternate site, if it was an alternate site that people felt like would be workable for them, that they would support that. And the public survey also indicated major dissatisfaction with the existing parking. We had over 900 comments about parking in the survey. Finally, the Williamsburg Library Board of Trustees expressed its preference in a motion for a newly constructed jointly funded facility at the existing city square. They did this for 3 reasons: the findings that 50,000 square feet of additional space were needed, the community-wide survey expressing strong public support for the site across residents of all 3 jurisdictions, and the need to minimize future operational costs. However, the board was really careful to state that they were respectful of all the jurisdictions and whatever choices the jurisdictions made going forward that they felt would be in their best interest. What the board really wants are modern library facilities to serve the public. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the proposed New Grove Library. I had a subsequent conversation since I met with the CIP committee with John Carnifax, and he clarified some things. We had originally talked about the county purchasing some property where there might be room to do a standalone building. He said now that that wouldn't be possible, but there would be possible to probably add 10,000 square feet to the existing community center for library use. Or there's a possibility there's 4 classrooms in the Frank building currently that have been have a temporary licensing with the schools contract, and when that expires, they might be able to be repurposed to be used by the library, so there may be no need for construction if that could be the case. So there's several options on the table about how the library could get some ongoing programming space in the Grove community. And the goals for that are to have an easily accessible community hub to deliver essential resources in an underserved community. Some of the things that we're very focused on are delivering equitable library resources to people who are unable to get to the library. We've been taking a lot of our family enrichment programs and holding them at Frank, some at the school, some outside, some in the parking lot at the Grove Community Outreach Building, Christian Outreach Building. So we have really been having a lot of attendance. We've had a couple hundred people regularly attending these events, which is a big showing for Grove, and are really building interest in the library being able to deliver these types of services. We know that 25% of the people there are non-English speaking. There's a real need for ESL classes. We've been talking to the state already about possibly holding some ESL classes either at the Williamsburg location or at Frank if we're able to find some space. We're also in conversations with the community. We know that there's a lot of interest in digital literacy. They need high-speed Wi-Fi access. We do have working collaboratively with James City County Parks and Rec. We have established a 24-hour high-speed Wi-Fi access point outside of Frank that includes all the parking lots and the playing fields behind it, and that was made possible by donor money this year, and it's already enjoying some robust use from the community. They've also indicated they need equipment and they need instruction. So we're looking in terms of being able to have laptops available for them to learn on and being able to do some basic instruction, especially for the older generations on how to successfully navigate the internet and use it as a tool, whether you're applying for jobs or health needs or government resources. It's very important. So that would be another important function of having a site there. And also just to kind of maximize the impact of all the different community organizations that are out there, whether it's Literacy for Life, social services, there's lots of organizations that we're working with, the Kiwanis, who want to do more things for children in that area. And if we had a little bit of a foothold that we could offer ongoing equipment and programs and instruction, I think it would be a great benefit to the community. So those are kind of my highlights. The last thing, I think this is a little bit dated. It's from 2018. But we uploaded all of the currently registered library holder users into the GIS at the county and the planning department generously made this for us, so everything in red is a registered library card holder. As I said, there's 60-some thousand, and you can see that last little circle is Grove. You can see the two other libraries with a 5-mile radius, and then Grove is kind of geographically isolated to some degree down in the eastern part of the county. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Could you go over option 1 again?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't understand. I thought maybe you were talking about Grove, but you're not.
No, I'm sorry, and I should have been more clear that I'm not sure how to get the full screen. Right. So this is for a major new library. Grove is a small neighborhood facility that we're talking
Right, well,
about,
so I
but
was
this is
confused.
actually a standalone library in James City County, which would be the current James City County Library in Croker is 34,000 square feet. So it's kind of on the same scope as that library is. We're proposing a 40,000 square foot library.
Where?
There's been some discussion of the different commercial corridors in the county because the county sees it as a possible opportunity to serve as what they call a shadow anchor and to drive a lot of people to it. There's been no specific location identified. But it does need to be where people shop and go and run errands. One of the struggles we've had with the James City County Library, which is a beautiful facility, is that there's nothing else near it. So it's really a destination you have to drive to. So we don't want to make the same mistake in terms of locating another facility.
So, I mean, if you look at that, your map there, I mean, the obvious place would be between the two big circles. Like near the police department, or maybe along 60 across from, I don't know where. Or no.
You know, like I said, it depends on if that is a major shopping corridor. I mean, that's really where you want to be. You want to be high profile. You want to be on a main road. You want lots of big glass windows lit up like a beacon so people see the activity inside of it. And I will say, too, these libraries are not the traditional libraries that we all grew up with. These are more active learning centers. So what the real movement is in libraries is you have space to create content, you have meeting space, you have collaboration space, you have programming space, you have maker spaces, you have, as in the case of James City County, the hybrid children's library and children's museum. So there's a lot of noise and activity, and they're vibrant places. So they are people drawers, people magnets, and they can help boost up a commercial area.
So 60, in the county is losing all these businesses.
Right,
I mean, there's
right,
big chunks of
right.
land. I don't know anything about buying them or purchasing, but when you drive from the outlets down towards the city, I mean,
Right,
there's
did it today.
all these big
That's right.
chunks of land. I mean,
Yeah, there is.
Yankee Candle,
Great
Right.
library.
already built,
Right, right.
That's something to think about. I mean,
Right, and I think we're open to different scenarios if the county decides that's the way they want to go. And my sense is that the county administrator really understands the type of location the library needs if it were to be built in James City County. So I think, and there's arguments to be made either way always. There's certainly libraries that have relocated in buildings that have been formerly commercial buildings successfully. There's also a strong argument to make something that's designed to be a library once you're investing that much money in it anyway, that's a showcase. So it really just depends on how the county decides to go. As I said, the library's real goal is to get new, modern facilities. So
Croker is absolutely gorgeous.
it is. It's a wonderful
I was
facility.
shocked when I went there the first time. I thought, oh, my Lord.
Yeah, it's
This
a
is
wonderful library.
beautiful.
And the county has continued to invest in that. It's relatively new. It was built in '96, but through CIP renovations, we've already renovated the children's room. We're getting ready to do the adult area. We've done all the HVAC. We're fundraising for a playground behind the building. So the county's done a great job of helping the library keep current. So.
Any other questions for Ms. Fowler?
You mentioned on your, on your slide about option two being $42 million. And one of the pros is that that would be a lower capital cost than having a standalone facility in James City County, which was $24 million.
Right.
But if James City County had to pay 70% of the 42
Right.
million, that's $28 million. So it wouldn't lower the capital cost of the
That's
county.
right, that's right. It depends on what's negotiated. I think I said possibly lower. And I think too, what I've heard is that I don't know that the county's interested in matching the circulation in terms of an investment in a building in another jurisdiction. So it's undetermined what their contribution would be. But you're right, if they paid based on the usage of the building, it would not be a cost savings. I will also say that I think the county's aware, and the city, that whatever is constructed, the county's going to be paying the majority of the operating costs going forward. It's already paying 70% of the operating costs of both buildings. And whatever's constructed, the county will be bearing that responsibility because of the usage. Right.
Dr. Rose, any questions for Ms. Fowler?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you all for your interest in the library. I really appreciate it. And we're excited that maybe we'll have a breakthrough and some clear direction this year.
Well, thanks for, I know this is your, I guess, third trip out this year, plus a couple last year. So thanks for all the time and investment in that. We
Sure.
appreciate it and the service you provide.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. So at this point, I will open the public hearing on the capital improvements program. And I don't see Mr. Everson here tonight, so seeing and hearing no one here, I will close the public hearing and turn it over for discussion. Ms. Bolster?
I've got about 3 or 4 things. If you got a chance to read my 2 March report, there were a series of recommendations that would go forward from the Planning Commission that would be placed into the memo from the staff for it. And the first one I wanted to talk about was Ms. Fowler's, and that I think the last slide that she had would be helpful, where she cited Mr. Carnifax in that discussion, because the current CIP package doesn't contain that information, and I think it would be helpful for it. The recommendation that the Policy Committee came up with on the New Grove Library was to add a note to the board saying that the Planning Commission does not support a standalone facility, but does support a co-located facility with either the new Lower County Park or the current Franks Rec Center and James River Elementary School. And I think what we heard was to do a co-location in the same facility, and however that works out, I think that's kind of up to the board. But I think that's still a pretty good recommendation to go back to the board on. The other set of discussions that the Policy Committee had, it was on the open space match, which we moved up. And in the staff memo that you got, and I talked with Terry beforehand, she didn't quite get that right. And what I'm recommending that we talk about in there is that what I cited was the, if I can get it up, is the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation, which is a state organization which rates the green space for matching points, includes criterions that references the Conserve Virginia mapping tools, and that the natural and cultural mapping projects would provide an update for the Conserve Virginia GIS tools, which is the point of why we're doing that. And so the natural and cultural mapping tool would provide the county a set of criteria for both the PDR and the green space piece on that. And that is consistent with if the county went to the green space and applied for the money for it. And I think that's exactly what Tammy has in mind, is to be able to use that for the staff and for folks to do that. So I'll send that correction into staff. The new James City County Library, which she talked about, based on that, the Planning Commission agrees that there is a need for a new library or expanded, but the decision on the location for it rests with the board, and just leave it at that. And this is, as you know, the second year that we had that, and I think that was pretty well clear. On the James City Library playground, Friends of the WRL, it really isn't a playground so much as it's a ecological park and play park for natural parks type of a thing. So it's not, that type of a thing. And so the committee recommends that adding the note to the board saying that the Friends of the Williamsburg Regional Library are funding the design and construction of the project, but because it's on county property, it will require staff time for the design, and the county will assume responsibility for maintenance to the playground. The concept for the project, of course, is that. So it's a plea to the county administrator to say, geez, can we do that in terms of supporting that program, since it is going to be funded entirely by them for it. The last piece that I missed, and I'm sorry I did that, but it was, I remember the comments that we had about the this is on the priority 4, the business ready site program. I think in the discussions that we had on this, there were 2 privately owned properties, the Hazelwood and the Hornsby property, and the owners have not been contacted to see if they're willing to participate in a Tier 2 effort or the project's 50% cost sharing. There was a thought from the policy committee, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that members, that before the Board of Supervisors approve funding, that the owners are contacted to see if they're willing to participate in the match funding. I don't know if
I think that summarized it, that you encapsulated the comments.
So that's the last one to do that, and I'll send that to you also, Terry, for the wording that I've got. Those were the only recommendations and updates that I had to add to Cherry's memo that goes forward to the board. And I think the slide that from her will be helpful in terms of understanding that for it. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Dr. Bolster. Mr. Alderman?
Thank you. I didn't rank the library, the major library expansion at all for the reasons that Mr. Polster mentioned, and I support his recommendation, separate recommendation to the board. I'm a great admirer. I hold the library in high esteem, and I accept the fact that we need more capacity, probably a lot more capacity and renovation both. And so, but I didn't feel like I could prioritize them without knowing where and how and who's going to pay and the whole thing. That's above my pay grade. So that's number one. Number two, I would like us to recommend to the board that they consider studying, aggregating a lot of these and doing them all at once with borrowed money. AAA-rated James City County can borrow money at a fixed rate for 30 years at 2%, maybe a little lower. And in this inflationary environment, I just think that's a compelling reason to do all 5 years at once, not come back for 5 years for another capital request, and take advantage of these artificially low interest rates. The market rate probably now is 4.5 or 5%, but the Federal Reserve is keeping rates artificially low, and be a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of that. So that's number two. And finally, I can feel the policy committee members roll their eyes, but I'd like to make one more appeal to move open space match up the priority list. I had it at number 4. My list is pretty consistent with the policy committee's list in almost every regard except this one. The open space match is just too good of an opportunity to pass up, I think. The residents of James City County have spoken loudly and frequently about the need for protecting open space. They supported a bond referendum in 2005 by 70+%. I mean, nobody votes 70+% unless you're in Russia, I guess. But we're headed for 120,000 people. The people of James City County don't want that. Again, borrowing money at 2% to buy open space or pay for conservation easements on open space is just a wonderful opportunity. I'm convinced we have a very solid mechanism for ranking the purchases fairly, and so I'd just like to move that up. As I said, I had it at number 4. Number 10's way too low, in my opinion. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. Mr. Kraut?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to echo Mr. Polster's comments that he did a great job leading the policy committee and putting these additional clarification notes together to pass on to the board. My compliments to you. I also wanted a clarifying question for Mr. Haldeman, but also wanted to comment on the open space match. For me, when I ranked it, it was number 3 on my list. And the reason that I agreed during our policy committee meetings to move it lower was because of the potential, the Board of Supervisor initiating resolution to look at 1 to 20 as the new by right for residential development in rural lands. And I felt that would be a inhibitor to development, but on further reflection, I think we also don't want to lose sight of the fact that as a match, that means that we're getting additional funds outside of James City County revenue for this program. So I could be very supportive of moving it further up if the Planning Commission was so inclined. I did the clarifying question I had for Mr. Haldeman was, when you talk about aggregating projects, do you mean if there's say there's a capital project that has funding spread out over 4 years, you're saying do the funding up front?
To look, yes, to look at it to see if it would work. I'm not sure how much of this would work. Social services, let's just pick one. 2023, they want 1.1 million. 2025, they want 10.4 million. And, borrow the whole thing at once. And if it's practical, I don't know anything about building buildings. Maybe they couldn't spend it all in 1 year. But
I just to that point, I think the way, if I recall correctly, the way most of these came in, whether it was the library or Parks and Rec or social services, it was the design phase was year 1, and then 2 years later was, then it goes through the RFP process, solicitation of bids, and then the construction piece. So, I think we can include it in the minutes. I'm not sure it's our lane to make recommendations to the board how to finance,
But I do think that during our conversations, especially with the parks, Jack was very careful to ask where there were projects where you could do asphalt, and the answer was probably if they looked at them. And so I think that there's several options, not only with the Chickahominy River Park, but they're up in the upper county. There were some pieces like that. So there may be some economies of that nature, so that instead of having this thing spread out all at one time, you're going to be able to do it at once. So I think there's 2 pieces of this thing that Jack's talking about.
I'm just recommending that they look at it, that they analyze it. I'm the last person to try to tell them how to do it, or which one's definitely going to work and which ones won't. But if you can, I'm just seduced by this, what I think is going to be one of the last chances to borrow long-term capital at 2%. And that's all. Just a recommendation to analyze it, not a recommendation to do it.
I wanted to come back to Mr. Kraft's comment on the open match and the 1 to 20 piece. And been spending quite a bit of time trying to see what that means in terms of going back and relooking Mr. Holt's paper that he provided us as we were going through the land use piece. And the 1 to 20 ended up with something like 125 parcels that would be eligible for this, if you all recall that. And so what I've been doing is looking at what those 125 were, and of course I've been using some of the GIS stuff from Tammy's natural and cultural piece in her habitat so that I'm consistent instead of using the state piece. And so what's interesting is when you start doing this for it, is in the upper county, and we're talking about the Barnes Creek AFD, the Diaskin, that's where all the last the flat land is. Okay, and that's also where some of the agriculture. So when you take a look at existing structures that are on properties on that, and you're going to look at probably where the development is, it's more than likely going to be there, and that makes sense in terms of the 64 and things like that for it. What's interesting, though, is the land that's in the forestry and not agricultural piece is essentially in the Wright, Yarmouth, and Gordon. And there are certainly opportunities in there where I'm not so sure there'll be development, but there may be other ways to do green space with the matching funds that we're talking about. And I think there's opportunity. So I think that by the time we get to July, we're going to find ourselves in a position to be able to say, beyond the 1 to 20, what other areas is the open space program going to be able to do it? So I'm supportive of moving that up for no other reason than if you did put it in that position of a higher one, let's say 5 or 6 above the park piece, it would give the Board of Supervisors something to think about in terms of taking advantage of the low interest rates, aggregating money for it right now. Because right now, $1.5 million every year doesn't get you very far on this thing.
If I could add to yours, another point is that a 1 to 20 ordinance revision, we know how long it takes to revise an ordinance. And so in the meantime, there could be a potential rush to develop before the by right changes. And so that's a further argument to say, well, let's get some green space money available early while we're doing the ordinance revision, and also to your point, Frank, as well, that you just made. So yeah, I would support moving it up.
Well, and I think the other reason that, we've all seen what the tax assessments are, and you've also seen some of the last word pieces. This is a perfect argument for the county to say, listen, this is a priority in the strategic plan as well as in the comp plan that we had. And here's an opportunity for you to go out and say something to the 94% of the citizens that said, well, you're not doing enough for rural lands and protecting that conservation. And so it gives them an opportunity, if they so choose it, to borrow the money to be able to do that or other projects. But it's an option that right now I think that makes sense, at least at this point in time. Anyhow, so I'm supportive of trying to move it up. Maybe if we could, I don't think it needs to go any higher than probably 7 or 8, somewhere in there, maybe. I don't know, somewhere in there.
Those numbers are misaligned, by the way. So
Okay.
Social services is number 6, police is number 5. I'm sorry, I've got it backwards.
I'd be willing to put it into 8.
So that would be below social services,
Below the Williamsburg Library,
or below the Williamsburg Library.
the Grove one piece that we just talked about. Just thought, there's how you all feel.
So it's just, so consensus move, open space match from 10 to 8, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, right below the Williamsburg, the New Grove
The Grove
Library.
Library, yeah.
I think that when we talk about this recommendation that Jack's talking about, borrowing the money, that open space match is another suggestion along with the buying out some of the projects or looking at consolidation for asphalt projects as an example that we heard. I mean, but those are at least three possibilities they could look at.
I would entertain it if we can include the caveat in the minutes that, you know, we really need to define what these programs are. I know we keep talking about that, but you know, again, I'm not a big fan of using borrowed money and tax money to do some of this when we see other tools getting employed. And so, you know, as long as we can talk, as we've talked before, about having some really defined parameters for what the money would be used for. And I understand that with Miss Rosario's and some of these other pieces going on that we'll get there. But, you know, I would hate to see, you know, good money go for land that is going to be subject to 1 to 20. The board approved the initiating resolution at their last meeting for the 1 to 20, and in conversation with Mr. Holt, I think that'll become a rapid priority for staff to get that ordinance done. So I think that really lessens the pressure outside the PSA on that portion. So.
Well, I'm supportive of putting some language in there that the reason we got into where Tammy is right now, if you all record, is the board wanted to know more on specifications for PDR projects. I mean, that's how this whole thing got started almost, 2-3 years ago, Paul?
The mapping piece?
No, the PDR, the Board of Supervisors asked for more delineation on the PDR program, and it was one of the things that Jason brought up and talked. And so we haven't yet gotten to that point with the board. And so I'm just suggesting that if Tammy's natural cultural heritage, that is the road to be able to tell us this.
Yeah, so to be clear, so there's ranking criteria already established, and, you know, certainly I think some of these more refinements, certainly some of these exercises that we're doing now to bring in some of that local context can help better inform the board. I think the board right now is very focused on financially how to allocate additional resources to kind of kickstart that. I think a lot of what, you know, they're seeing is a lot of what you all are seeing. It's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. You got to have the priorities, but to have the priorities, you got to have the funding. You got to have the funding so you know what the priorities are going to be, so you can figure out how much money you're going to need. So they're very much wrestling with that right now, but I think it'll come together pretty soon.
Have a consensus on moving the open space to 8?
We better, somebody already did it.
Oh, okay. Oh, I wasn't watching my
It's
screen.
already done.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, okay.
Radar.
Yeah, I mean, I still just remain concerned that as a community, we won't pay for recycling and want to spend $300,000 for a billing system to bill our members or our residents for recycling, but we're willing to spend millions of dollars for green space. So, you know, there are different conservation efforts, but, you know, which is the priority and which benefits people more, so.
I kind of agree with Mr. O'Connor on that. I don't think the county should be in the business of buying open land when you can give incentives to landowners to put their property in conservation areas. I mean, we did that in Albemarle County. Yeah, we had the whole valley in Keswick. I think there's 1 or 2 people that are not in a conservation, and they were dying to do it. And you could put farms together and get your 200 acres, which was the minimum there.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Well, that's what you're talking
Yeah,
about. But you were
conservation
saying,
reserve for open space.
yeah, but not,
Not buying the land,
Not
but buying
buy-
development rights.
oh, okay. I was
conservation
confused.
easement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
So
That's
it's the
all it
same
is.
thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
that's
exactly the
if you
same
said
thing.
conservation easement, I know exactly what you're
Okay,
talking about.
okay.
Okay, so,
So I think we have consensus. Is that what I hear?
Yes.
So, and then also, Mr. Haldeman, to your point, we'll capture in the minutes the recommendation to consider financing on the other piece. That's the best vehicle according to Mr. Holt, so, thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, discussions? Dr. Rose?
No, not at the moment. Oh, I will note, just I know it wasn't what you were speaking of, but Barbara, the one challenge with more land in conservation easement versus the county buying land, in conservation easement, people who don't own land don't have access to green space. And if you care about opening up green space to more people, then you do want it owned by the county so that people can have access even if they're not landowners.
Yeah, but the matching fund could work in a different way, and we've done this with the Maitland Farm, where the matching fund came from the county, but a conservation group put up the other half. So that's
Right.
an example of the green space, and that's a tourist attraction for us. And we have two other things like that. So there are different combinations of how this could work for it.
Any other discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of the 2023 to 27 CIP request in the order in which it's presented here.
So, as amended?
As
and-
amended?
And with Mr. Polster's additional comments?
Yes, please.
So, got that?
Got it.
So, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Crop?
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. So we do not have a planning director's report tonight, and we are on to, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any planning commission considerations either. So, no planning director's report, and we're on to planning commission discussion and requests. Anything for the group?
Just like to thank Ms. Costello for yeoman's work over the last, 6 weeks, I think, or probably 6 weeks for us, probably much longer for her. And it was a great job putting all this together. Thank you.
Here, here.
Great comment, thank you. So, I just wanted to throw out a couple of things to everybody. The Board of Supervisors meeting, was that earlier, that was earlier this week or last week? Board of Supervisors meeting last week, the applicant deferred the Ford's Colony case for another month, so that will come back in April. The board did pass an initiating resolution for staff to start crafting a 1 to 20 ordinance, and they've also asked staff to craft an ordinance to contemplate how to address developable density on developable area. So if you have a 100-acre parcel and 35 is protected for RPAs or wetlands or steep valley, steep ravine, steep slopes, that 35% be reduced and the development be considered on the 65%. So I think I captured that adequately. So that will be going back to the board, I assume, next month for some more work for Mr. Holt and his team. So, and then appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I'll reach out in the next few days about committee assignments so we can hit the ground running. So those of you who will be policy will have a busy year. So thanks for offering to do that.
Cool.
So, anything else?
I just, in a conversation prior to the meeting, I asked Mr. Holt to look into the idea of taking his chart at the end of the planning director's report and that shows all the land use cases in progress, to see if we can't put a little link on the planning website. So that, and this was generated by a couple citizen comments that I received saying they'd love to know ahead of time what cases are working their way through the pipeline and where they might, whether they're conceptual plans, SUPs, rezonings, and so on. And I thought that would be a good idea, because his report does such a great job of encapsulating that in a single spreadsheet. So
I agree.
I agree.
It's a good
I
idea.
have people ask me, and I said, I'd love to be able to just tell you to go here and see what's coming up. And that's, I think you get more input from people if you have that. Agree.
Or marching orders. So,
requests.
In your spare time.
anything else for the group? Thanks for coming out tonight. Mr. Holt promised me we'd be done by 6:30, but, you know, we'll hold them to that. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
So we are adjourned to our April regular meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.